Welcome to another episode of Get Paid for Your Pad. Today, my guest is Andy McNulty. He's the CEO and founder of Touchday, guest communication software. And he's been on the podcast before. We've met a couple of times on the conference as well. And today we're diving into Airbnb guest communication tips for 2022. So, Andy, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Jasper. I'd forgotten that I was on the podcast before. That was probably 2014 or 2015.
That was a long
time. Yeah,
for sure. Yeah. Last time we saw each other was in London at the Host 2020, was it? Or Host 2019?
2019. It was October 2019.
Just a couple of months before everything changed.
a different lifetime.
Yeah, it's crazy to think. I used to have so much fun at these conferences, just meeting people and stuff.
I know, I did as well. There's something about those conferences which is really energizing. Not just to meet like potential customers, but more so to meet, guys like you and other people in the industry who you have this virtual relationship with. And particularly after the last 2 years, I can't wait to go back. I was supposed to go to one in the States, but they're banned European travelers, as you probably know, until just a few weeks ago. I can't wait to get back on that conference circuit and meet people again.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Last one I went to was the VRMA that was also October-ish, 2019. I guess those conferences were around the same time. But that was in 2019. I'm getting confused.
I know. The worst 2 years in history, in recent history has passed. So we forgive you for being confused.
All right. Well, let's dive into it. Before we talk about the communication side, let's give the listeners a quick update on Touchday. Like, what have you guys been up to? How's the last few years been for you guys?
Well, for those of you who don't know, Touchday is a digital guidebook solution. So if you used to send your guests something about their pre-arrival information and how to operate stuff in the home and things to see and do in the area, you maybe used to do that with Word or a PDF. This is a digital version of that. We started in 2014. For about 4 years, it was just like a side gig. It was a bit of a hobby because myself and my partner, Joe, we were deeply in corporate life, earning nice salaries and not wishing to jump ship and land into this very entrepreneurial startup world. But we decided in 2018 and going into 2019 to double down on Touchday because it seemed right. There seemed to be a lot of appetite for this kind of service. And so we took a small amount of investment and then grew really nicely in 2019. And then, of course, COVID hit. And like most people, who were faced with those early days of COVID, you were looking around at each other virtually and saying, what do we do? Like, is business over? What I remember one of the first discussions we had were, oh my goodness, we need to cut our prices. I was like, no, that's dumb. No one's traveling, no one's buying stuff. So there was a period for a few months where it was really, it was really rocky in terms of knowing what was going to come, and like we all faced that. And then soon you figure stuff out, and you start to live with the virus once the vaccines, of course, kicked in. And we actually ended up having probably our best year in the last year, and so much so that we're in about 17,500 homes now.
Wow.
Whereas just a few years ago we were like in 1,000. So it's been a really, thankfully, touch wood, for us, I know there's a lot of people that have really suffered, but for us, it's been very, very positive. And I would say it's been very positive for a lot of our customers too, those who are in drive to mainland destinations, those who are in Bali or the Caribbean, or, that's impossible. That's really hard. But the majority of our customers are in the US, UK and Australia, and all three of those markets, well, maybe not so much Australia, but certainly the first two, had a lot of domestic tourism, as we all know. And many of those customers and many of your listeners who are in those destinations will probably have had the best 2 years ever.
Yeah.
I think the challenge is to continue that, because those travelers who were going to stay domestically will now probably look at flying abroad. And maybe if they fly abroad, they may stay in a hotel or a resort somewhere. So, I know a lot of our customers who are property managers now have that struggle to talk to their owners and say to their owners, yeah, it's been a great 2 years, but we can't bank on that happening in the next year or two. But nonetheless, I think despite that, it's shone a wonderful light on the industry. So many people now have, through lack of choice, had to go and stay in a vacation rental because it was one of the least risky places to go and stay in the pandemic, wasn't it?
Yeah.
So I think it's been wonderful from that sense on our industry. And to answer your question, very, very fortunate for it to have been wonderful for our business as well in the last year or two.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think you're right. Like I think that 2021 was probably a record year for a lot of hosts in those markets that you mentioned, and I agree. Like people will start traveling internationally again, but I still think that the next couple of years, I think there's going to be a continuous positive effect of the trends that are happening right now that will still drive like really great results in the next few years for short-term rentals. Number one is because what you mentioned, people prefer to avoid like crowded hotels. Right. But then number two is also people have more flexibility now. Right. So if you have like 7 or maybe 14 vacation days, like it's pretty common in the US, UK, and Australia, I think you can only travel like maybe 1 or 2 weeks a year. Right. But now if you're working from home, you can literally jump in a car and say, hey, let's work 1 week from this place, or let's do a long weekend over here. So I still think that drive to destination local demand is going to maybe not, there'll be some variations of volatility for sure, but I think the trends are friend here. What do you think?
Yeah, I 100% agree with you. I think that let's face it, this industry is short on supply and long on demand. And that counts in our favor as well. The second thing I would say is because of the boom of the last 2 years in the staycation market, there are lots of people that would have jumped on the plane to Florida from the UK or Spain from the UK, who now saw parts of the UK that they kind of knew existed, but never really appreciated. I count myself in that group too. And there will be, to your point, a large percentage of us who may still jump on the plane somewhere else, but we may take those short breaks now that we know about those wonderful places in the country that we hadn't been to before. And I noticed, honestly, the standard of the places I stayed in here in the UK, much higher than I remember, a few years ago. And I think that is a big factor as well in the continued demand for this kind of product. I think it's seen less as this ancillary, sort of slightly risky product when you compare it to a hotel. What am I going to get when I get there? There are still those places, but I think the professionalism has moved on so far that my experience of staying here in the UK is going to be probably, I would imagine, a fairly similar experience to others. We will notice that it's less amateur and more professional.
Yeah, for sure. And that goes well into what we're going to be talking about today, because, now that more and more people are starting to use Airbnb, we're seeing a lot of new Airbnb users, especially at our properties. I would say like about 50% of the inquiries that we're getting right now are new people. They haven't used Airbnb before, right? So, combine the fact that there's a lot of new Airbnb users with the fact that that people prefer selfless check-ins. Right. I think those two factors combined means that, our communication, we really have to up our game when it comes to communication to our guests. Right. We have to educate them on not only how to use Airbnb. Like I find myself educating a lot of our guests because they don't have a profile. They didn't write anything in their about me section. So the first thing when I get those inquiries, I'm like, hey, I highly recommend you fill out and tell us a little bit about yourself, because that's going to get you accepted by more hosts. And it's also for us, it's also important to kind of know who we're hosting. So I think communication in 2022, guest communication is going to be a really important aspect of being successful.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly with that. One of the great things about the job that Airbnb has done is to raise the profile such that there are all these new types of guests coming into the market. Not new types, but just, you know, people who are new to our industry. And you're right. I must admit, 50% is a significant chunk, isn't it? I didn't, but I suspect it's probably fairly similar. You know, the number of younger people coming into this now because they see the brand Airbnb. It's a kind of a cooler thing than maybe it used to be. So I can well imagine that being the case. And as you rightly say, then that younger generation have a different set of communication expectations. I think it's probably fair to say that they're used to their devices more than the older generation, certainly faster around them. And because they're faster around them, they're probably also lazier about life in general. I count myself in that, even though I'm not the young crew. I do have a phone and have started to find myself being increasingly less prepared for stuff, because you just go out with your phone and you think, well, I've got my phone, you know, I can fall back on that. So I think that mindset's really one of the things that's kind of quite important to think about in how you communicate with those guests who are brand new to it. They are going to come and they are going to expect that certain professionalism that I mentioned because of the halo effect of Airbnb. You know, it has a very beautiful way of presenting itself to the world, and then that needs to be matched by what you find. And I think that expectation of a traveler versus the reality of what they find when they arrive has always been the challenge in our industry, and will always continue to be so, and probably more so. So I like the idea that there has to be this renewed focus on how you communicate with that younger audience, that newer audience that has been used to the very clipped and, you know, predictable hotel experience. And I think the challenge is like how you communicate to them, but how you communicate to them with style and with like an energy that connects with them. And I think that's all about trying to surface the things that are really unique about your proposition, about what it is about your Airbnb, what it is that's different about your home, what it is that's different about staying with you. You know, like what do you know about the area? What expertise can you bring to a young person that is new to the area? You know, they all want to experience something interesting. What is it that makes you unique? And I think that's one of the things that actually came up. We've done a podcast recently. Tyann and I started the Guest Cast, it's called, and we interview guests, not industry people, but real guests. And one of the things that came up in our very first episode was the idea that you can provide something that's unique and tailored to a guest that no hotel can do, because you've got this one-to-one connection. You're not hosting hundreds of guests in a single hotel. And there was one example that the interviewee gave. Her name's Alyssa Cincotta. She's married to Sal Cincotta, who's a very famous photographer. And they went to stay in a place in Italy, and they were given a private tour of the cellar, and afterwards given like a bottle of limoncello, which reminds her always of the experience they had staying with that person. She's never drunk the limoncello. It sits there on her shelf. And I said, oh, why do you drink it? She's like, well, I don't want to drink it because I always want to remember, you know, that's what I want. Like, I want that experience, that takeaway. And I think Airbnb hosts and managers, but everyone in this industry is so uniquely positioned to be able to do that. There's so much going for our industry that's unique and quirky. It's almost like taking that sort of amateur thing that I mentioned earlier. The amateur thing was always the unique and quirky thing. It was always like, well, I'm going to stay at this place and I don't know what I'm going to find. It might be kind of crazy murals on the wall, but it was always an interesting part of the amateur. And I think now we can take that professional approach, but let's not lose that quirkiness. Let's not lose that sense of what makes our home individual and what makes it special. Those are the sort of things that I think the younger traveler is super keen to connect with.
Yeah, for sure. And we're definitely seeing a lot of younger people are using Airbnb for the first time and staying at our units. And like you said, you know, I always think back to my nephew. He just turned 18, and I just watch the way that he consumes information. Like I don't know if he's ever read a book in his life. Well, he probably has because school probably forced him to.
Under duress, yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, it's any information that he needs, he goes straight to YouTube and watches a video, right? And it's just like that's how they consume information. Like, they don't like reading, and it's not just the younger generation. I think that entire society has shifted from the shorter attention span, especially when it comes to reading, right? So I think there's two parts of like how we can really improve our communication based on these trends that are going on. Is number one is we have to be very comprehensive, because we're not meeting our guests, right? And guests are looking for contactless check-ins. We have to be very comprehensive. Like, we really have to explain everything in detail, because that's also something people want. People don't want to think too much. They want convenience. They just want to arrive at their units and not be in their heads of trying to figure things out. They just want to have that smooth experience where they can just enjoy and feel relaxed. And then the second part is, I think, and that's the reason why I think digital guidebooks are really important, is we have to present our information in a visually appealing and easily digestible way. Right? I think, what are your thoughts on that?
I think you raised a really good point there, which is the way in which you communicate to different people. And we're talking here about the new entrants to the market, the younger generation. And I think we have to figure out how to communicate with them at the same time as we're communicating with our other guests, who may be the 70-year-old grandparent, and maybe the 50-year-old father or mother of 2 or 3 kids. And I think the challenge in all of that is to communicate the information clearly. The 70-year-old is quite happy to read 2 lines of words telling her how to get into the home. That would appeal to the younger generation as well. And I think that is the important thing to hook onto, is how do you clearly communicate the things you need to communicate regardless of age. The days of sending guests a post-booking email with, I've had them, you've probably had them, paragraphs of, this is what you need to do, and thanks for your booking, and here's your booking reference, and here's how much you paid, and here's how much we still want from you, and here are our rules, and here's where you go to park, and here's what time you arrive. Like, everything in one email. It's too much. It needs to be broken down into bite-sized pieces. And I think that's one of the ways that the digital guidebooks can help with that, because particularly where ours are structured, you've got it really structured into a menu that you can customize however you want. So you can put the menu headings very literally. So instead of saying something like, about the accommodation, and then having loads of things under about the accommodation, you might say, Wi-Fi password, operating the heating, and you make it very literal, so that when I see the guidebook and I see all the headings, I know I don't have to hunt for anything. I click on it. And one of my pet peeves is that pre-arrival. Where do I find the key, or how does the keypad work? Or if I'm going into an apartment building, I've got to get into the gate, and then I've got to go into the front door, and then I've got to get to the unit. And it's a challenge. Like, don't get me wrong, it's a real challenge to make all of those pieces of information really short and succinct. But that's what it absolutely has to be. And I think in doing that, you actually optimize the communications for all age groups, so that they all win, rather than saying, this is what the younger generation want. It's actually what everybody wants: cleaner, clearer communication. And I think also the different forms of communication are very important too. So, you've spoken about video. I think it's wonderful to try and do both. You have to recognize that some people, like you've said, your nephew, who just wants to see the video, and I'm sure he just wants to see someone show him on the keypad how it works, or do a video of like where to pull into the drive and where to park in your spot. But equally, there's going to be the other person that just says, like, I don't want to watch the video. Can you just tell me in 2 sentences, where I park? And so it's like, pull into the gate, turn left, and look for bay number 103. That's all you need to say. And then it's nice and easy. So I think there's ways of doing both. And that's what we facilitate in our guidebook, the opportunity to present the information so that you're talking to all of your target customers in the way in which they want. I think also the mode of delivering that, Jasper, is one thing. Like, it's great to complete the guidebook, and any guidebook provider will have the same challenge, which is I create this guidebook and I've put lots of great content in there and I've optimized it so that it's really easy to find stuff and read. But how do you introduce that to your guests? That's as important, because if you send them a post booking which says, thanks for your booking, blah, 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 blah. Oh, here's a link to our guidebook. Well, no one's going to read that. A, because it's so far out from their stay that it's not relevant yet. And B, because you haven't actually told me what the guidebook does. So we advocate, yeah, by all means, send one after booking, but then try and do it again 7 days prior, try and do it again 24 hours prior, and maybe mix it up. So don't always send it by email. Maybe the 24 hours prior, send them a short text. Here's the guidebook link. It's got everything you need to know about your stay. Or words to the effect of, here's our guidebook link. This will enable you not to have to wait for us to call you back if you want the answer to your question. Words to that effect. So you give them an incentive. You make them realize what's great about this. Tyann came up with a brilliant template for using email as a way to introduce your guest to the guidebook. And it was short. It's like short and sweet, just what you described, like, so that it would be read by the younger generation. And it just bullets. It bullets her frequently asked questions. She says to herself, what are the 5 frequently asked questions I get by guests pre-arrival? I'm going to bullet those. So I'm going to say, hey, Jasper, we've prepared this guidebook. It's absolutely essential you read it. Here's why. What's the Wi-Fi? Where do I park? What time's check-in time? So you bullet them. And then the guest knows, this isn't some random link. This is really something that's actually going to assist me and make my journey and my pre-stay experience less anxious, which is, it's the worst time, isn't it? That traveling. You're excited, but you're also a little bit, I've got to remember this, I've got to remember that. So you just want it nice and simple. So yeah, it's a brilliant point, and I think it's triggered by this idea that it's a younger generation. But I think it's upon us all to think about how we optimize the way we talk and what we say, so that everybody can digest it fast.
Yeah, I think you make a really good point, which is explaining why they would use the guidebook. Because in our minds, we know all the information that's in there, but to somebody who's never used Airbnb and gets a message like, hey, here's a link to our digital guidebook, that person might be thinking, well, I don't know what that is. I'm not going to look at it. Or they might be thinking, oh, that's local recommendations. Like, I'll check that out once I'm actually at the unit. So they might not understand that this has all those vital pieces of information that they need, as you mentioned. So that's a really good point.
And I might say one other thing, Jasper. We've often thought about guidebooks being for the guest. It's like to help the guest to have a better experience. And I actually think it's as much about you, the host and the manager. So what you're trying to do is, yes, give your guests the best experience, but you're also trying to get them not to be texting you as much, not to be calling you as much, not to be emailing you as much or WhatsApping you as much. Don't get me wrong, like, the communication is great. And I think having zero communication is the wrong approach, because then you don't get to detect where something's going wrong and put yourself in there and make sure it's right. But I think you do need to minimize certainly those basic frequently asked questions. And that's where we've seen from a survey we did to our user base that there's most impact. So we surveyed all of our customers and said to them, is Touchday saving you time? Yes or no? And if yes, how much? And we had roughly 80% of people replied saying that it's saving them around about 25% of their time. And 25% on the scale of 0 to 100 doesn't sound much. But if you put it inside your own world, and you could get back 25% of the time that you currently spend managing guests, that's a significant amount of time that you've now got to put in other areas of the business. Or if you're hiring somebody, there's potentially a 25% either saving or that they can go and do something different. And that to us was, we weren't looking for everyone to say, oh, it saved us 100% of our time. That's A, unrealistic, and B, like I said, not the goal. Like, you don't want to not have a dialogue with your guests. But it certainly needs to be thought of as, how can it be my bank of frequently asked questions? That's what it should be, so that a guest self-serves rather than calling me. So I just wanted to make that point as well. I think that it's not just solely about making the guest have a great experience, but also about your own life.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that like, communication is never going to be 100% automated. because for a couple of reasons. Number one, what you mentioned is, that's not the goal. There's all, and also it's important for us to build a bit of rapport with our guests as well, because that makes them feel more comfortable knowing a little bit, about you, even though you're not like telling them much about you, but I think just with a little bit of personal communication, it makes them feel comfortable. Plus, it's also important for us to have that connection, because that's gonna allow our guests to kind of forgive us if minor things go wrong.
Yeah, I agree with you. It's that old saying, isn't it, that an issue that you do well becomes an asset. So like if I have a problem as a guest and you solve it for me instantly, I think of you in a far better light than if the issue hadn't been there at all, paradoxically. So it's like, I see it as a real opportunity to have that dialogue, definitely.
Yeah, for sure. Sweet. Well, this has been really interesting. I'm excited for 2022. I think it's going to be a great year for short-term rentals, as you mentioned. So just to kind of summarize what we talked about, I think communication has always been important. There's the personal communication to build the relationship with the guest, but also we want to provide information, comprehensive information. And we want to present it in a way that it's easy to digest. It's visually appealing. We can use it on different, devices. I like how you mentioned that there are like, more old school people who prefer to, maybe read versus watching a video and stuff. So I like the idea of, providing a printout of our guidebooks. Right. So for the people that prefer to just sit down and have a read through. And yeah, I think we have to put ourselves in the shoes of our guest avatar, right? And really understand like how does that person want to consume information and really deliver on that.
I think that's really a great way to think about it, is putting yourself in the guest shoes, like adopt that guest avatar and think for a while about not what you do, but the way what you do is received. Maybe put it in front of a few friends. Like if you were staying with me and I sent you this sequence of stuff, like what's wrong with it? Just don't tell me what's great about it. Just tell me what's wrong with it so I can optimize it. Yeah, I think that's really wise words to put yourself in the frame of mind of the guest.
Yeah, 100%. Awesome. Well, before we wrap this up, let the listeners know how they can, how they can get in touch with you, or in touch, no pun intended.
Yeah, very easy. You can go to touchday.com, sign up for a free trial. There's a big free trial button, gives you 14 days free. If you want to see what other people are doing, touchday.com/example-guides, which you can also get to. There's a drop down on our menu, demo. If you click the demo, you'll see example guides. It gives you 9 guides that current customers have done, and you can see how they've optimized things and what they've done. You'll find we changed throughout COVID. We rewrote all of our code base, and the product now, when you open it up and you look at it, it's nice and easy to use. It's just like it's fun to use as well. And I have technophobes, self-confessed technophobes, who say to me, Andy, I can do something. I can actually do this, which is kind of gratifying to hear, because that was the point. So yeah, do that. You'll find a whole bunch of questions on the knowledge base, which will help answer stuff. We're always accessible as well. And the pricing starts from $99 per year for a single property. And then the more properties you have, the pricing tiers down considerably. Yeah, so that's us. Come check us out if you want. And if you've been challenged with how do you get guests' information in the right format, and you've been using PDF and Word docs, come over to this side. Come away from the dark side. Come and join the digital side. It's dead easy, and I guarantee that your guests will love it as well. That's been the feedback which we consistently get.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think I think when it comes to technology, there's a number of tools that I think you need as you scale up and as you onboard more units. But I think one of the lowest hanging fruits is really the digital guidebook, right? Because it's very affordable. It improves the guest experience. It saves you time. as well as a host. So it's almost like it's almost like a no-brainer piece of technology in my opinion. And I think we have a 10% off code as well that people can use on GPFYP. So that's going to give you 10% off the Touchday guidebook.
Yeah, I think it's with 10 on the end. So GPFYP 10 will be there.
GPFYP 10. Well,
yeah.
if either that or it's one of the two.
We should make it easier. What should we call it?
Yeah, it's funny because when I first started working with some technology companies for Get Paid for Your Pad, I thought GPFYP would be a good code because it's the abbreviation of Get Paid for Your Pad. But then like a lot of people told me like it's too complicated, so I've changed it for one. We partnered like a long time ago, right? But after that, I started saying recommending the code PAD, like PAD.
Yeah. That's a good one. Yeah. But, I was thinking of something on Legends, like LEG10 or something. But we can that's another. We can figure something out. I wanted to say, by the way, though, on the Legend stuff, I really like what you're doing, you and Eric, and I get the emails, like get the daily digests, and some of the things that you say on there. I wanted to say that they're not just applicable to the Airbnb world. Like I read some of that stuff, and I have like moments where I go, oh, like that's applicable to what I'm doing at this stage. Yeah, I mean, like if you have any listeners that aren't subscribed to your emails, I would say go and check them out and subscribe to them, because you get like a nice easy daily digest. It's not quite daily, is it? But it's a couple a week maybe.
Yeah, we're doing one every weekday. So Monday to Friday, we're doing one email, either coming from me or coming from Eric. But I appreciate your words, and it's good to know that the emails are helpful. And for those who are listening, definitely. If you're not on our email list yet, just go to getpaidforyourpad.com. And you'll be able to put your email. We'll send you a little report as well with some usual tips, and then you'll be able to receive those daily emails. So, with that said, let's wrap it up. Andy, thank you so much for coming back on the show. Hopefully, we'll get to have a drink somewhere at a conference in 2022, and I'm sure we'll have you back on the podcast as well at some point.
That'd be great, Jasper. Yeah, thanks for having me again. And I second that. Let's see each other in 2022 awesome. And raise a glass. Yeah.
All right.
Cheers.
Sounds good.
Cheers. Yeah, bye.
Bye.